Welcome or welcome back to Pewdiepie. I'm Zui and I hope you enjoyed today's video. But before we get right into it, I'm obligated to remind you to click either the like or dislike button, commenting something down below, and of course sharing the video so more people can see and enjoy it. This is very important as it helps with the YouTube algorithm. I want you to know that your help is greatly appreciated. If you have any suggestions or ideas for a story, my Discord link is in my link tree that is down in the description, as well as my Patreon and Ko-fi for any donations you may want to send my way. Every cent counts. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed today's video. The moment you had seen the intruder, you thought you'd have a heart attack. However, as if possessed by a fighting spirit you didn't have, you didn't hesitate. Strange. You often imagined how it would be like if something during your night shift would actually happen. Sometimes you thought you'd just end up cowering in fear as you called the cops, but as you slammed a novelty Roxanne Wolf baseball bat onto the unsuspecting intruder's head, you knew that you had been overthinking it. You were a night guard at the Fazbear Entertainment Mega Pizzaplex. It had been your first job ever and you were really proud of it, getting such a cushy job. Born a natural night owl, you didn't mind the late shifts, even if the pay was meager. The Pizzaplex had only 3 night guards, including you. And one of them, a big Russian bear called Terminator, was merely a shift guard, meaning he did both day and night shifts. And honestly, when the notification, "Night guard, there was someone outside my room," appeared on your security tablet, your heart stopped a beat. After all, you were alone. And only in a few seconds, thousands of thoughts had went through your head. The first was, man, if the Russian was here. The second, why do I have to be alone? The third and final one was simply, Jesus Christ, do I have a big mouth. As ironically, just a few days before this incident, you bragged about beating the crap out of the first burglar to try and burgle during your shift. All this, however, now felt like a distant memory. As you stood above the burglar, heart racing, out of breath, he was knocked out cold. What should you do? Call the cops? Yeah, that was the best option, wasn't it? You were about to walk away when you realized you should tie this guy up, throw him in the isolation room that was in any security office. With shaking fingers, you pulled out your handcuffs. However, just as your hands took hold of his wrists, he groaned. Not thinking, you screamed as you once again punched his neck before crawling away on all fours. Heaving heavily, you stared at him. He was wearing all black, had a somewhat buff build, shoulder-long black hair. He wasn't even wearing a ski mask. What an amateur. After a quiet minute, you got back on your feet and continued cuffing him. And once the deed was done, you turned him around to throw him on your shoulder. With a pounding heart, you delivered the guy to a nearby security office, where you proceeded to place him on a chair, before locking the room behind yourself. Through a window, you stared at the guy in disbelief. You just apprehended a criminal. What should you do now? It didn't feel as heroic as you thought. The obvious answer was calling the cops, but Fazbear Entertainment had like 100 rules. No, the safe option was calling Brian. Brian Chesterbell Crawford was the leader of the security guards, and while he was incredibly lazy and most of the time high as a kite, he seemed to be the only adult to call right now. The phone rang as a droplet of hot sweat ran down your forehead. The entire place was admittedly cool, but this excitement was making you lose it. Someone finally picked up, but you were met with silence. Hello? Is that you, Night Guard? What do you want? You heard a scratching noise coming from the phone as Brian rubbed over his forehead. Emergency. Brian blinked. Emergency? I hit a guy over the head with a baseball bat and now they're knocked out and, You looked through the window again. The intruder had woken up by now and was groaning and shivering in his seat. He's groaning and stuff. Brian yawned loudly as the information you had just given him was processed in his brain. Wait, what? Brian was now fully awake. Call the cops? I'll be there in 10. Hastily and yawning still, Brian fell out of his bed as he tried to put on socks and his underpants from last night at the same time. Something entertaining like this hasn't happened in the Pizzaplex ever since the place burned down and he was forced with identifying the remains of the now ex-night guard Vanessa. After putting on an additional pair of sweatpants and a dirty shirt from a few days ago, he stared at himself in the mirror. Brush teeth? He asked himself. But he just grabbed his mouthwash, took a deep sip, swapped it around in his mouth for a bit before spitting it out in the sink. Pointing finger guns at himself, he said, "Alright, showtime." 20 minutes later, Brian stopped in front of the Pizzaplex. The police was still there. Using his security badge as leverage, he managed to get inside, just as 2 armed officers were escorting the intruder outside. You were close behind them, face in a worried grimace as another policeman took your interview. Your eyes landed on Brian. A familiar face that took a heavy stone off your back. However, it was just then the intruder turned around before leaving through the door and shouted, "Fucking she-beast!" The officer shoved the guy angrily outside, where he then was pushed into a car. Meanwhile, your eyes filled with tears. "Ma'am? The officer next to your side. I understand. Stressful night. Miss, if we have questions, we will call you. Otherwise, that's it." You nodded. Eventually, you were alone with Brian. The two of you awkwardly standing there. "I think you need a drink." You nodded without saying anything, following Brian into Roxy Race where you sat down in its diner. He generously ordered a server staff bot to make both of you a milkshake. "We got no alcohol here, sorry about that." You shrugged. "I don't drink." Putting a hand under his chin, Brian looked you up and down. "You look like shit." Your entire body was tousled from the exhaustion, and there was a little bit of blood on your shirt from the guy. You bit your lower lip in embarrassment. He was one to talk. His eyes were still bloodshot, probably from his... And, by that I mean, like, someone got you through in a ringer, you know? I'm not talking about your face. It's pretty cute, actually. But it's understandable that you're, like, looking like this. He said, shrugging, interrupting your thoughts. Like... It's just funny to me, I guess. Sorry if I insulted you. You blinked, unsure whether or not he was trying to be a dick or cheer you up or flirt with you. But I did notice something. I'd call it interesting. He smirked. What is the deep, deep lore about your reaction to being called a she-beast? Angrily you scowled, jumped up from their chair and jumped at the fenceless man. Enraged, you punched him in the chest. "Stop calling me a muscle-packed swamp ogre!" Brian coughed in pain. I didn't even say that, though. Seconds later, both of you were sitting back down. Brian rubbed over his chest and stomach as he growled. Okay, I hit a nerve there, and you hit mine. My weakness is stomach hits. The man gulped while you were a blushing mess before him. Your hands neatly folded in your lap as the milkshakes finally arrived. Sighing, Brian started drinking while you just sat there, sad, embarrassed. He was looking away, patiently awaiting for you to say something. You started meekly. As far as I can remember, I was always a bit round. Round? Brian said, lifting an eyebrow. Yeah, it's embarrassing. But you aren't round. He grinned. Square would be a better description. Can I keep telling you my super serious backstory now without you interrupting me? Brian could appreciate a geeky reference like that. Leaning back, he said, Go ahead. Huffing, he continued. Huffing, you continued. When I said round, I mean muscular, of course. In fact, ever since I was a child, it was exceptionally easy for me to build up muscles. Well, just as much as it was building up fat. The older I got, the more training I needed to do to avoid the latter scenario, and now you flexed your arm, bulging your muscles. Sure, I'm not a giant like Dimitri, but enough to be regarded a she-beast. Brian blushed as he observed your muscles move under your skin. The man was attracted to all kinds of women. Sure, he wasn't a man of extremes. He liked his girls above 18, under 40, and without any extreme quirks, and he would consider your muscles hot rather than too much. So it wasn't that extreme, at least. Brian leaned forward a little. Let me guess. The children in school weren't attracted to that and bullied you. You shrugged. Yeah. Brian leaned back in his seat and crossed his arms. Uh-huh. You smiled sadly. There was an incident in high school where I was invited to a party. Let's just say it had to do with 7 minutes in heaven and me having to, they bullied me. The man blinked. Rule one of bullied people, never accept an invite to a party. I mean, now that I'm an adult, I understand that, but, when you're a child, it's different. You still weren't sure if he was trying to stop you from talking about this, but you blinked, looking down at your hands. And after a minute of silence, he spoke up again. I don't mind strong women. Okay, now he was definitely flirting with you. And even if it was just to cheer you up, it made you happy. Finally, you allowed yourself to take a few sips of your milkshake. He had ordered the neutral milkshake, which meant it was just sweetened frozen milk with cream, but it wasn't bad. Just the right amount of sweet and creamy, especially now that you left it standing there for like 5 minutes. So aside from the intruder, how was your night? Huh? Oh. Brian entered the Pizzaplex usually right after you left it, due to shift differences, so he never really knew how your nights usually go. Pretty normal. I fulfilled all my duties, like locking up the animatronics, but I have the slight feeling it would have been preferable if I didn't. Brian chuckled. Monty, Roxy, and Moon have security AI settings. They would have wiped the floor with the guy. Come to think of it, The night guards have always been saying that it's safer for the night guard to work here than during the day because of that. You know, rather, the animatronics are protecting you, and you're not protecting the animatronics, that's what I'm trying to say. You deadpanned. Well, I didn't feel safe, you know. Says the woman who gave a guy a concussion. You snorted. Ah, I knew I could make you laugh. Brian clapped his hands. After a while, the atmosphere became more relaxed. The two of you were sitting on the stage in the atrium. Brian let his feet dangle while you leaned against its railing. You're checking your security cameras. How do you even get inside? That's what I'm trying to figure out. You mumbled. There were only very few places cameras weren't recording everything. Well, except for one place. Brian, could you have gotten inside during the day? You could have hidden in the maintenance tunnels. Amir's gonna flip if he has to install camera systems down there too, joked Brian. I don't know, it's just a thought. Man. Brian let himself fall back on his back. Stowed away probably for hours in the maintenance tunnels. Dodging staff bots like a pro, only to then leave and immediately get his ass handed to him by a baseball bat. That's fucking hilarious. You looked at Brian, who started giggling. That's exactly my kind of humor. You're the best night guard. You blushed and looked back at your tablet. Seconds later, though, you felt hot air breathe behind you. You know, night guard, he whispered seductively. Brian was on all fours, only mere inches away from you. I don't think you're a she-beast. You bit your lower lip as you glanced back at him. I think you're hot. Isn't that a little unprofessional, Brian? You're talking to the guy that came to work in sweatpants, a dirty shirt? I mean, shit. He pointed at his naked feet that you only just now noticed. I forgot to wear shoes. As far as I'm concerned, I'm off duty. And let me guess, this entire thing made you horny? He smirked. You sighed, and then shrugged. Fine with me, you said challengingly as you took a step forward, your hands unbuttoning your blouse. Parts and services, then? No cameras, no witnesses. You sighed. Okay. Let's fuck.